Good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Seldin. I'm president of the Montessori Foundation and chair of the International Montessori Council. And this is a meeting for anyone, regardless of what organization you might be affiliated with. We are part of a collaborative of Montessori leaders and organizations around the world that have marshaled to try to do what we can individually and collectively to help and to support and to help one another to connect. And we just want to give a shout out to all the good folks in all the training programs. CGMS has done yeoman's work. Thank you, Mark Seldin, Kitty Bravo, all the people at CGMS, AMS, National Center for Montessori in the Public Sector, AMI. Can't thank everyone enough. And again, we're all in it together. This meeting is being recorded. If you prefer not to have anyone see your face or hear your voice, keep yourself muted and turn your camera off and just listen. We're inviting everyone to share your email address with us so that we can reach back out to you and let you know of ongoing things. You can find the recording when this thing is processed on the Montessori Foundation's YouTube channel. You'll be able to find it on our website under what we call free reads. You'll be able to find it later in the IMC, International Montessori Council's member library, and you'll be able to find it on our Facebook page and in our administrators discussion group and our conversation forum. Without any further ado, let me turn the meeting over to whichever one of my colleagues decided that we're facilitating today.
I think that would be me today. I'm going to start, but I have also, so I'm Kathy Leitch. I'm Executive Director of the International Montessori Council, and have been working with everyone, all of you, and of the other organizations that Tim has been talking about on creating some task forces of people to help look at some of the issues that we are all dealing with in schools. And so thanks for being here. Thanks for all your support and your outreach. We have been pleasantly inundated with requests and offers for help. And just want to remind everyone, we are part of a really wonderful community. This Montessori thing has something going for it. And I think that, you know, that when you look around and you think about, you know, I don't know, we have like 4 pages of people here, at least on my screen. A lot of people that come together because we want to support each other. So I've invited several people to be on that I know have some expertise in this area or something that, you know, they can offer and help us with. But also it's an open discussion, but I'd also like to invite each of you to share either in the chat or, you know, unmute yourself and add to the conversation. This is a conversation. It is not a formal presentation. We do have some things to share that I think people would be happy to hear about, but the landscape changes every single day. And so every day we have to update our thoughts about this and our decisions and how we move forward for our families, our children, and our teachers and our schools. So what I would like to do is introduce a few people that I have asked to be on today, and we'll just kind of go around, share a few things, and then I will open it up for some discussion. I would like to announce that we will be moving. Next week's meetings will be announced within probably by tomorrow or Saturday, depending on my time available. I don't want to overpromise. Somebody told me that last week, don't overpromise, so I have to be careful, but you will get notices about next week's meeting. We're going to start moving into some smaller group meetings as well. So what we're hearing from everyone is that not only do you need this larger community of each other, and it's really inspiring to see that we really do come together, but it's also, we need some practical small group discussions. Some opportunity to dig into the nuts and bolts of what kind of decisions you're making with your schools, how to assess where you go next with finances, economic decisions, how you message that to your parents and teachers and your community. And so we're going to be doing some announcing for next week, some smaller group, you know, maybe 10, 12, 15 people at a time. So we can have a little bit more intimate conversations and really get into, I think what you're really asking for are some real practical, tools and strategies to implement right away. So hopefully we'll do some of that today, but we'll be announcing that for next week. So just quickly, I'm going to go around and say a few people's names so you kind of know who they are. So if you guys could just say hi as I call your name, and then we'll come back around and start a discussion. So Cindy Acker, I know you're down on my screen. You're there if you see Cindy. And people might be on separate screens, so we'll do the best we can. Mary Ellen Cordes, I know you're here. See you there. Thank you. Let's see, Mark Seldin is here. Mark Seldin's going to captain our finance team. So you'll be hearing from both Mark and I on the next meetings. George Markham, I know you're here, George, and you've been working on a few things in the background that we'd like to get updated on. And is there anybody else here I asked to come? Marilyn, Martha Carver, you're here somewhere, right? Martha Carver.
Yep.
There you are. Hello, Martha. And of course, Jonathan Wolff. Thank you, John, for being here today. And I know that there are many others of you who, might want to contribute things you've been learning, things you've been trying, things to share. And so that's part of what makes this kind of meeting a really rich experience, is that we do have so much to share. Cindy, I know you had a real practical thing to share with us about SBA loans that you brought up last time, and I know people have been anxious to hear. So do you mind taking a minute to update that in case your audio goes out? No audio.
Your mic.
You're muted. No.
Still muted, Cindy.
We'll come back. You want to try again?
There she is.
Shall I do it now?
Oh, there you go. Yep. Now you're there. No one out again.
There we go. How am I now?
Yeah.
Good.
Okay. One of the things that came up as questions for some people is whether or not a not-for-profit could get an SBA loan,
Right.
Because there apparently have been some restrictions around that before, and the path is clear. And so to apply for an SBA disaster loan is what you'd be applying for. I suggest to anyone who is wondering how their school is going to do and they're not so sure to go ahead and apply, because there's no prepayment penalty. So if you find that you don't need it, you can just give it back and no harm, no foul. And it takes longer the more that more and more loans are coming in. The process is going to start to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've gone through it. It's pretty painless, and I will say that people who are not techie, please do apply online anyway. You download the forms and upload them back to the portal, and it's not so difficult. What I have learned through the process is that it's really imperative that you look at the attachment. So there's the application, and then on the website, it will say down below, there are some supplemental attachments that you may or may not need. What I was told by the person who worked with me is fill it all out and submit all of it at the same time, because what happens is that they start to roll, and it takes maybe 3 weeks from the time that you apply to be able to get funds. But if you send in an application and it doesn't have everything, it just sits. It doesn't stay in the queue with the other applications. It just sits there until the application is complete. And so avoid making sure that you've crossed all of your T's and dotted all of your I's. Have someone check every single paper over 2 or 3 times to make sure that you aren't missing anything. And all of the additional information, you need your P&L, you need your balance sheet, you need something that gives them, there's one sheet that is just monthly revenue, so that they can see by month over the course of, I believe, 3 years' time, how much revenue you get each month. Because from that, they're going to try to estimate what it is that you might need. And there's another sheet where you have to anticipate what your expenses will be and what your revenue will be coming in. And even if you don't know, it's just a guess. And so you guess how many parents are really going to be paying you tuition, guess on the side of caution, and fill that information in. And I believe they are doing 2.5 times whatever is your gross revenue, something like that.
Okay, Cindy, that's really, really important information. Would you be able to put the link in our chat so that people who are interested that could access that directly? And then,
I can.
Sorry?
I can, and I also did a Kiva loan, and anyone who's done Kiva before or gotten a Kiva gift before, Kiva is it's an organization that is international, whose work really it is to assist with people who are in need and to provide them in need, and their business people, and to provide them with a loan to be able to assist their businesses. And people can also give and choose different kinds of people to lend. But what Kiva is doing for this is partnering up with a local business entity to provide the loan. And so you fill out the information online. It's also pretty easy to do. I think it took me 10 or 15 minutes, something like that. And then they connected me with an organization that was in the city next to mine in Oakland, and that they have their own set of paperwork, and that's maybe an hour's worth of time, something like that. And then that's the organization that actually lends the money.
Awesome.
Kathy?
Yeah?
Hi, it's George.
Hi, George.
Something that I'd like to add on to what Cindy said. I'm looking right now at an article I read this morning in Nonprofit Quarterly, and they're saying that an important provision of this emergency small business loan program, loans are forgivable if the nonprofit keeps staff on the payroll between March 1st and June 30th. This, in essence, turns the loan into a general operating support grant. In other words,
Yeah, I should have mentioned. I should have mentioned that. Right, and it may not be 100% of the loan that is forgivable. It's a percentage, is what they're suggesting. So because they're still trying to work out all of the fine tuning of that and the Family Leave Act and a number of other things, they don't want to tie themselves down exactly, but some portion of the loan, perhaps maybe up to 100%, but we don't know, is forgivable if you keep all of your staff on, if you don't furlough anybody.
Okay, that's it's great information, and George, thanks for adding to that. I see Mark has put in the chat room a Kiva link, and so we'll grab the SBA loan. So I appreciate anybody who's helping to take a look at that chat and keep things going there for us. I'm kind of looking at it, but that's there. Appreciate that, and the SBA, we can get there as well. And that may be something that, as we look at small groups for next week, maybe that's one of the groups that we can put together, is to help walk people through. Because Cindy, I'll tell you, you made it sound really easy. And so what I know, okay, and I appreciate that. What I know is that what you mentioned was having your P&L and your balance sheet and 3 years of monthly expenses all ready to go. So it's easy if you know what those are, have them available, they have accurate information, and you can put them in there, right? So the background information is that if that's something you need help with, you know, and you're not a large school that has a business manager and a CPA and all of those things, then those are the areas that we can find mentors to help you with, and help you understand what those things are and how to access them and all of that. I'd like to call out is Deanna from Inspire.
Kathy, can I mention one more thing before you go on?
Yes, who is this? I can't see.
That is that if you have any question about anything on the document, you should call the number. And when I called at one point, I was number 171, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to hang up, or this is going to take too long. And I held out, and actually it took about 35 minutes. So I would say just leave your phone on speaker and get your question answered so that it doesn't hiccup the process that you're trying to do. You want to make sure you're accurate so it doesn't get pushed back.
Yeah. That's really important. Thank you for that. Those are like practical things everybody wants to know, right? So thank you for that. I'd like to go back to George for a minute. George, I know you and I talked about this Family First Act and the family leave and those kinds of things. And someone has, John Crosby has just put into the chat that, apply for that as well. George, do you have any information on that? I know MPPI is working on and doing a webinar specifically on that topic.
Yeah, I wasn't actually aware that they're doing a webinar, so I'm sure that's a better source than I would be. But, sort of echo what Cindy was saying, that there's still a lot of unknowns here in interpreting these things. But I think something that's really important is to take a close look at the FFCRA that was passed last week, because all the reading I've done on it, at the risk of oversimplifying, says that as of April 1st now, they changed it from April 2nd to April 1st. As of April 1st, if you have employees who qualify in various ways, like, for example, they have a child who's home because their school is closed, you, the employer, may have to pay up to about 3 months of either full or 2/3 pay to them. You may be obligated to do that. And obviously, if you think about that, that's huge, potentially. Now, in theory, with the FFCRA, the way it's paid for is by reduction of the employer's Social Security contribution in the payroll. But you start thinking about that and saying, okay, well, that's whatever that is, 8% or something of payroll. What about the other 92% that you have to cover?
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm reading is that eventually the small business will get paid all of this back, but it could be a cash flow thing. In other words, you could have to be making payroll for a very long time because of the FFCRA for these folks who are staying home and not working. You find a way to find the cash to do that, but then not get the money back for it from the government for quite a while. So, I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an expert on this stuff by any means, but I would strongly suggest that you look into it and be familiar with it, because it could have a big impact on small businesses. The point being that prior to last week, this stuff only applied, well, it's been extended as well, but it only applied to large employers. But now it's dropped down to everyone, even one employee. You qualify for these requirements for emergency leave and family leave.
Right. Yeah, thanks for the update, George. And I will get the information on MPPI. I know they were doing, I signed up for the webinar, but it was full. So I've reached out to see when they might be doing that again, or to get some information for everybody. And these things are changing. Next Wednesday, I can tell you that we have on our weekly webcast, we have a human resource specialist coming on to help interpret some of this for us, and to be on a panel to talk about hopefully we'll have new legislation by then that is going to apply to private schools, early childhood, all of that, and then some updates on this Family First Act. So there's a lot going on. Wednesday webcasts, you can sign up Montessori.org on our news and announcements page. There is a link to register to get information about those webcasts. And so we knew that human resources and helping people navigate this, even though it's done by state. So the disclaimer, in a lot of ways, some of these are federal regulations, but your state's going to have some say in this as well. So we understand the geographical limitations as well. Mary Ellen, thanks for putting in the website for MPPI, MontessoriAdvocacy.org. That's helpful. And I'm going to go over to Mark Seldin. I'm looking for you. There you are, Mark. Hi, Mark. Mark, if you don't know Mark Seldin, well, he's Tim's son. That's his biggest claim to fame, but not really. Mark runs the CGMS. He's the founder of, one of the founders of the Center for Guided Montessori Studies, and also has a school that he's running. So he's in the same boat in Cary, North Carolina, with all of us as school heads and leaders. And Mark also has an MBA and a background in finance. And so I have asked him to, help us and, reach out to schools and support. So Mark, Mark's also been doing these videos. So you may have seen Mark's YouTube videos that has been helping schools as well. So Mark, can you just kind of weigh in on any of these things we're looking at now?
Absolutely. I'm actually struggling to stay abreast of the new rules and regulations that are coming out about things like family medical leave, and I don't have anything to add to that other than that I'm also very interested to know what the requirements will be.
Mhm.
I will say that, the best thing we can do is to continue to support each other and to have meetings like this. I know that it's one thing to talk about the generalities of how we respond to this crisis, but every school is different. Every school is unique. And in order to help every school in the best possible way, we really need to come together and talk specifics. And it may not be possible to get into too much of that in a very large meeting like this. So I know Kathy and I have talked about putting together small working teams where people can really get together and talk about their specifics and their school and, the requirements of their state legislature and whatnot. So, do look to hear more from us about all those things in the very near future.
Yeah, we hope to have that ready. And I know several of you have offered to help mentor smaller groups like that. Mary Ellen, I'm going to reach out to you. Any thoughts from you? I know you had offered to help mentor some folks, and I think it's very, very appreciative, and we're really moving into that mode at this point.
I'm really happy to see Cindy's face on this call because she's been a great advocate in the Bay Area. So that information that you brought forward was wonderful. So I've heard from people individually that, of course, the biggest concern is how do we stay in business, which friends, you're in a business. I know that you all are school people, but you know how that is. We tend to forget that we're in the business. We have to stay open for the sustainability factor here is very important for the future, for the children and for the families and for your staff and for yourselves. So keep that in mind. What I would be really interested in, I did put forward that I was interested in taking this as an opportunity. So I would be very interested in helping anybody who would like to look at the opportunity to reevaluate their school in terms of scaling down a little bit or looking at what the possibilities are. I also want to be sure that the independent schools realize that when you get requests from parents to have tuition returned, that you will put yourselves out of business and you can't do that. So this is a huge opportunity to look to the future, a huge opportunity to market yourself as a very caring community, which you are, to take care of the community of people that you have. And that will go a long way to helping you stay afloat in the coming days. Be sure you communicate. You know how important it is for all of us to stay connected. It's critically important that you communicate in some fashion to the families at your school often, not once a month or not thinking, well, if I don't say anything, maybe they'll forget that I'm here. If teachers are still working from home, have them call the families in their classrooms, express their concern. They don't have to listen to where is my tuition. But I did hear from a California school today that the parents are now saying, well, we're unemployed. How will we be able to pay tuition? And those are some things that's sort of like looking at what we can do to mitigate that kind of situation. And that would be in a smaller group for sure. But since we're all in a real crisis mode here, we have to take the opportunity to, first of all, appreciate what Tim and Kathy have done with putting us together and being able to communicate, and remember how important that is to roll forward with your staff, with your children, with your students, and keep things going online. I know that Zoom never expected to be a cocktail hour facility, but I hear that people are actually getting together and talking on that. So Zoom is going to make it through this very well. So anyway, I'll put my email out there, and if anybody would like to do that individually, or if Kathy and Tim want to put something together, I'd be so happy to look at balance sheets, and I'm a finance major.
Yeah, so that's why I asked you to come, Mary Ellen. But I think that
I know.
what I'd like to do, if you are reaching out for help, go ahead and write it into the chat room, because we will be sending out sort of an all call, but we'll have some mentors set up for these smaller groups. And so we can look at geography or size of school or need or different things like that. And our finance group will be talking about that and And we're looking for your input as well. So if you are looking for to be part of a mentoring group, go ahead and put it in there. Let us know, and we'll certainly follow up with you on that. And those we expect to start, like Mark said, relatively soon, because the need is critical, and we understand that. So we're
Kathy, one more thing, if I may.
Sure.
You know how all kinds of people are thinking of creative ways to stay afloat. No pun intended with the cruise ships who are attempting to do that. But, there might be some opportunities to offer tuition going forward, like at 75%, something that would keep you going. So don't think that you have to stick with what you've always done. Really think out of the box, if you wouldn't mind. Okay, I'll shut up and take a...
No, Mary Ellen, I think this is such an important part of the conversation, and I'm sure other people will weigh in. But when you think about what you said, something really important. If you tell your parents you don't have to pay tuition, you are pretty much saying we're closed for good. I mean, we need tuition to pay our bills. So, those of you who've seen Mark Seldin's videos or read the letter that he so graciously shared with us, he gave parents choices. And choices give people some sense of empowerment. And so that is a strategy. And so that's one way of looking at it. There are other thoughts, such as deferring tuition. I understand you can't pay it right now. We're happy to have you re-enroll, and the tuition can be deferred. And this works for different models, work for different schools. Again, this is about choice, right? So it's also about meeting with a family individually and helping them through a tough time, if we can do those kinds of things. It's also about not devaluing what we're offering to families, what we're offering for them in engagement, in community, in contact with familiar teachers, with giving them some certainty and an anchor for what schools provide. What the school provides is not your building. Please remember that. What your school provides is a community, a safe space, something to count on, something that's reliable and consistent during difficult times. That has value. So I'm really passionate about helping schools to see that we have something to offer our parents. We cannot apologize for a crisis. That's out of our control. What we can do is to continue to do what we do best, which is serve children and families in the best way possible. So I think before we get too far down that road is to really look at what is the value you provide. How do you articulate that value in a way that parents feel like they want to pay for that value? And then how do you assist and help the individual families who really are not going to be able to continue without some help? So I would look at things like financial aid, and I would look at things like loans, and I would look at things like deferred tuition until next year. So there's different options, and we can get into those in the small groups as well. I know many of you have already sent things out to your parents, made decisions, and of course you have to, right? Parents are asking these questions. So, we all have to be thinking strategically about how to save our institutions, how to save Montessori schools. That's one of it, and keeping teachers employed is part of that as well. So Marilyn, I think that really is a very important point, and working on this in small groups, I think, is going to probably work a lot better. There's people in the chat asking for like specific things I might be talking about. So yes, put in there if you're looking for the small group mentoring. If you're looking for a particular resource, I will copy and paste the website link where we are starting to gather some of these resources and store them. And I will also, I think that the other place where we have a lot of this is in some of the Facebook pages, the Montessori Conversations, Montessori Foundations Conversations Facebook page. A lot of those links are there to the letters and to the videos and things like that. But I will go ahead and put the website in here so you have that, and that's kind of where a lot of the resources are currently being uploaded as fast as our volunteers can do it. And keep in mind, everybody's volunteering, right? Everybody's really trying to make this be a group effort and everybody work together. So anyway, I think let's see, Jonathan, I'd like to kind of get your input. I know you like to hear from people before you assess, so I gave you a little time to listen.
Well, I want to reinforce what Mary Ellen said and you said, Kathy. If there was ever a time to share with parents, not rhetorically, but with actual services, why our schools are indispensable to their children and their families, now is the time. And as I was listening to you, Kathy, and you, Mary Ellen, three things came to mind that I think every school needs to be gently within the realm of balance with their teachers, moving toward making themselves indispensable in parents' hearts and minds. One is moving toward more educational continuity through online services, where parents are feeling, no, it's not your child's Montessori classroom, but your child's learning is going to continue, and we're going to help you with that directly. The teachers are going to help with that. They're going to give you parents some ideas. With the younger children, we may even send you some materials to work with. So educational continuity is the school is operating. The second is, and we really haven't talked about this, is teachers and administrators offering parents help about how to negotiate work and parenting at the same time, or having their child home 24/7 while they're trying to get over their financial crisis. So I said in a prior webcast, for the first time, we are more and more put in the role of the therapists for the American family in crisis in Montessori. And I know we're not therapists, we're not psychologists, but part of our role of service and to help parents feel that we are indispensable is, tell me how things are going on at home. Tell me your daily schedule. How can I help you get your work done and have your child be safely and meaningfully engaged? And that's support for the family. And the third one, and Kathy and Mary Ellen talked about this, is constant, as frequent as humanly possible, constant connection. Children seeing children, their classmates online, children seeing and having interaction with their teachers having interaction with the parents in their classroom. We just came from a all community meeting at the Newgate School, in which even the Montessori Foundation Lab School, in which even high school students were involved in. We're all going to come together and just check to how we're doing as a community. So it's educational continuity, it's support for the family, and it's a lot of community connection. So people feel, no, we're still a community, we're still a program, we're still a Montessori program, and we're here to help you, the family. The message is we are indispensable, and we are going to continue all the way through this period being indispensable to you. Hopefully that kind of value proposition or value message will make people feel, well, of course I'm going to pay tuition because I'm still getting support as a family person, I'm getting support in the community, and my child's getting learning support.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. And one of the things I did mention to those families was, if your family is in financial, I mean, I had to ask them to re-enroll. That was my job. That was fun. But I would say that the idea is that, you know, if they really are struggling, know that we're here to help you work these things out. And so, you know, once they feel like they're part of that community and that hasn't gone away, that has real power in a school. You know, the stakeholders in the school. So I wouldn't underestimate that. I know that Martha Carver, can you unmute for a minute? You had put something in about CAPE, and would you mind updating us on that? I'd like to hear from that if you're there. I'm not sure if she is there yet.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks, Martha.
Sure. So the legislation that passed the Senate last night has to go to the House for final approval, and then it'll go to the president for signature. There's always the possibility something is going to change between now and then. But CAPE has been lobbying the legislators on the behalf of private independent schools K to 12. I know that NIAC has been doing their status of that, but CAPE's latest memo, which I could put in the chat, iterates the bill and talks about what is covered for private schools. and we should be very grateful a lot is covered for private schools. How it will work is the funds are administered by your local LEA, which is your local public school that might be the one that could give you special education services. So the funds will go to that LEA. The LEA can only take a minute amount out of that to administer the funds to you. And what they've opened up is quite a bit. The CAPE newsletter will give you the pages to read. But, you know, like point 3, providing principals and other school leaders with the resources necessary to address the needs of their individual schools. By making that point so wide open, that doesn't limit to just children of special education services. And so I won't go over all of it, but I will say it's very optimistic. One opportunity, if we're going to think opportunity, and my brain always goes to that, is they will pay for summer school and running summer school, academic, and also they say mental health services. So in my brain, we already run a summer school in my school. I could already tell we were going to need to look at it differently this year. I would consider having your staff and your community really look at not just that academic piece, which we're experts at meeting children where they are and bringing them, but also the social emotional piece, because this is traumatic for our families and for our children. And perhaps there is funding there that what we do best in meeting the needs of the child in the whole child may really be an asset. So I'll put those links in the chat. I will also, you know, just go to the CAPE website once the House finally signs it and it has the president's signature. That'll be great. And if you don't, get a relationship with your LEA administrator. Make sure that they know you're going to come shopping, because if you don't, those funds go back within a year.
Martha, that's great. And for those of you who don't know, those people who don't know what CAPE stands for, can you help with that acronym?
Yes, it's the Council. Let me just find it back here on this screen. Council for American Private Education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's important that we, you know, let people know, and it's an organization that there are Montessorians represented in that organization, and it's a good place to get some of these updates. So thanks for that. And I think all of us can continue. If you put the links in, we'll make sure that they also go into the various places that we're publicizing things as well, so that people have access in a variety of ways. For those of you who aren't familiar or as familiar with Zoom, underneath the chat on the bottom, you'll see 3 little dots. If you click on that, you can save your chat. And so when this chat is over, it will be all saved for you. So don't feel like you have to rush and try to get all the links at the same time. That's far. So I see lots of people putting in that they're interested in the small groups. Mark has put in his letter that Liane, and Liane is here, right? Liane Watson, hello, Liane. Liane works with Mark at, is the head of school at Renaissance, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so Liane, I know that, thank you for sharing that letter. How has it been received by your families?
I've heard from over half my family. There's still a group I have to follow up with.
Mm-hmm.
The majority have been willing to pay the entire month of tuition. A couple of people have said they would pay half.
Mm-hmm.
A few have said they will unenroll. But the vast majority, I would say 95%, have said we're a community and this is the only way we can ensure that we'll be here, and we want to support our teachers and our school.
Wow.
I cried a lot this past few days.
I know. There are so many blessings in this. It's terrible to say in the midst of a crisis. Well, it's not terrible. It's good to acknowledge and be grateful that the human spirit is alive and well in many, many ways, and we get to see examples of that every day.
Right. But to Jonathan's point, we are staying very engaged with our families. We're having a morning story time we're just preschool, a morning story time every day, yoga class. Each of the classes are meeting. Tonight we're having a parent meeting online. So, you know, we're doing our part of making sure that they still feel they're a part of the community.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add, I keep being reminded that as we continue to encourage the teachers to tell stories and to read books online and things like that, that we do have to be aware of the copyright laws, and that there are particular books that have, by the publishers, been allowed for children's reading for just this purpose, for educational purposes. But do check that and make sure, because that there are clear violations if you are reading things online to children that are copyright. There is an infringement law. So those are things to check out. Mark, somebody's asking about permission to access the letter. You got it? Okay.
I'm looking at it right now.
Okay, good. All right. So, and somebody's asking about the letter. It's up a couple of links. So go back to that and you'll find that. So Tim, can I have you maybe fill us in on where we are at Newgate too? Because I think people are anxious to hear too, just from, you know, what are we doing at the lab school, and what's the reception and the feeling you're having from our families there?
Well, it's something where I've got incredibly bright people, just as Liane, you are working with Mark. Kathy Leitch and the team of our teachers are working around the clock to get quickly up to speed on distance learning from toddlers through high school. As Kathy mentioned, we hold weekly town meetings of the whole school community. This week, we asked the secondary or high school and middle school classes to invite their kids to join us. They didn't have to, but many of them were there. They spoke. They're full members of the community. We also had some younger kids. Last night, we've been holding these family gatherings, not just at Newgate. We had a young lady, Zoe, talking last night from Montessori School of Athens. It was just absolutely amazing what she was saying. But what we're doing is the very thing that I'm hearing Mark and you, Kathy, you were so eloquent in having the job of explaining to parents that, you know, we need your support. We're not having much of a problem at this point with families leaving us. There's a strong general sense of community. We're communicating with them every day. By 6 o'clock, Tanya is sending out an email. All the teachers are communicating with the parents daily. They're also doing the live either Google Hangouts or Zoom meetings like we're having right now at the class level with the kids. They're singing together. Some parents are feeling stressed out, just like I imagine your parents are, like we never signed on to be teachers. We're just saying, you know, relax. We're trying to make sure that your graduating seniors are going to be able to graduate on time and course completion will be done. We're basically really focused on mental health and giving people that sense, like Mark, John, everyone else has said, that they're part of a family, that the biggest thing that they've got is not the highest quality education. You can learn chemistry in any school. It's really that sense that there's no shame, that every child is honored in his or her own right, that every parent is treasured as a human being, and that we know that we can't be right for everybody, and that we're more than comfortable with real dialogue. I mean, the president of the local school board is one of our parents, and she lovingly said, I wish you guys would slow down the pace and just extend school into the summer. And we had a real conversation about that and didn't make any commitments about what we do, but we made it very clear that we're very willing to talk about all that. So I guess that kind of covers the nutshell. So far, things are okay. We're watching cash like a hawk, like everyone else. John.
Yeah, Tim, one thing I'd like to add, which I've also noticed in watching how you and Tanya and Kathy have supported the Newgate community, it would be very easy in the sort of rush or hysteria to get children learning at home to push teachers too hard. Teachers are going through a lot themselves in their personal lives and their family lives. So one of the things I've really noticed at Newgate, which I think is great leadership on the part of you, Tim, Tanya, and Kathy, is to have regular touch-base meetings with the whole faculty at a program level. Well, how are you doing with this juggling act of your own family, your learning, steep learning curve to do distance learning with your kids? It's really important that we create community with our faculty and not push them too hard. They need to understand also the reality is we need to be delivering these some sort of services to the parents and staying connected, but we also want you to keep healthy emotionally and physically too.
John, I really appreciate what you're saying. I can't iterate that enough for all of us. I mean, we ourselves are probably under intense stress because we're worried. We're trying to sort through, as Mark said, the ever-changing landscape of opportunities and rules, regulations, conflicting reports. But one of the reasons why we run Newgate at the same time that we are this international group working with parents and school leaders like you and with parents is that it keeps us real. And that's what I treasure about running a school. Having grown up at a school like yours, and Mark was one of the children at that school, he knows all too well what it's like to have a father who's focused on the school instead of meeting the needs of the family as much as the kids would wish. It keeps it real. It's not just fairy tale talk. We know what you're going through.
Yeah, I think that's, it does keep it real, Tim. And I think we all feel like, we really are in the same boat. So, whether you're a board member or a school leader or administrator at a school, we really are trying to grapple with the same issues and use some of the leadership principles we talk about and actually start applying them in a new way, in a different way of looking at things. I have a question here, and I would encourage you to go ahead and put any questions or any particular needs or challenges that you're having into the chat or unmute. If you'd like to go ahead and speak, ask your questions, that's fine. I do have a question here I think is a really interesting one that probably everybody's wondering. Laura says, I'm curious, can anyone speak to balancing self-care at this time? I have a home-based program. I'm the director and guide with my own daughter who's now home trying to find balance of taking care of all my families and my own. I work with toddlers whom, as you know, have unique needs. I happen to be an infant toddler guide, so I get that. I totally get that. I think self-care, we have a task force that's actually working on self-care and looking at putting some things in place, but I'd like to take a minute. I think Christine Lowry might be on this particular Zoom. If you are, Christine, would you mind unmuting and just saying a few words? And John, would you follow up with that? Because I think that these are things we've really taken seriously as probably one of the most important things that we have to do for ourselves.
Thank you, Kathy. The self-care task force team is working really with every stakeholder group, teachers, parents, school leaders, children.
Well, this woman she's in all the groups. Okay. Where are you, Lori? Because you're in all the groups.
And so we are putting together, we've got a three-pronged set of ideas, and if any of you have ideas you'd like to add, we'd love to hear them. One is that we are getting ready to begin posting every day just a short little 3 to 5 minute video with a self-care tool, technique, a wonderful song by Andrew Cutt, just something to remind yourselves to center a little bit as much as you can. We also are looking at holding a town hall meeting like this that will be stakeholder specific. So we'll have one for school leaders, we'll have one for educators. The parent task force group is also working on providing some support to parents, and particularly this issue of how do I balance I've got my own child at home. I've got to work full time, whether I'm a teacher or not. We've still got family life. And so that marketing advertising piece is being put together as we speak. And our first meeting will be on Monday for parents to talk about just that, balancing, and how do we do that. So look for those things really soon. The third piece of that is that we're looking at one Friday early evening, like 5:30 evening, gathering of the entire community, whoever wants to show up, open town hall. And we'll spend that time talking and singing. And I know that Jonathan Wolff is an expert at telling great jokes. So maybe we'll have an open joke telling, and we can let some of our 5-year-olds come in and tell their knock-knock jokes.
I'll try to keep them appropriate, Christine.
Those are the 3 things we're working on right now.
Yeah. So people are asking where they're going to find that information. If it will be updated on the Montessori.org, click on news and announcements or urgent news, because that's where we're keeping all of these kinds of things that are changing pretty much daily. And we hope to get an email out to our group, which is about 20,000 people. We'll get that email out hopefully this weekend and get everybody, knowing what's coming up next. John, can you maybe speak to a few practices that would be helpful? Thanks, Christine, because I think everybody's holding on, like, when is that going to happen? So, but John, to help us through some of I call them practices, right? Because I don't think you ever master them. I think you're always in second period on these things.
Yeah, I'm not even out of the first period, I don't think. That's why I hang out with people like you. Christine, thanks for the overview of our upcoming services. That was great. The way I'm thinking about this with adults and eventually with children, meaning parents, teachers, and then children, is I'm wondering whether there are 2 parts to self-care. There's noticing when our energy is off and when children may be being influenced by our anxious, stressed, overwhelmed, speedy, whatever that energy is, and noticing when, look, I'm not all here anymore. I'm not being positively mindful. One of the things I suggest that teaching teams do, and this could also be done with parent teams, significant others and people in the family, is the adults talking about what their default modes of stress are. We all got them. When I get stressed, I get speedy and I get loud and I don't listen to people. So just the adults in a family or the adults in a classroom talking about, so when we start to lose touch with ourselves, what are those symptoms, and really sharing them so we can support each other to notice, I'm off. I'm not totally positively present with these children right now, or with my work, or with my family, or with the teachers. And then learning to, do mind-body strategies to reboot, whether it's deep breathing or something you say to yourself, or a visualization or a little meditation or prayer. So it's noticing and then rebooting. And that's a little different than preventive medicine. Are there some things, as busy as we are as parents, teachers, and school leaders, where we can still do every single day? My regimen here at Tim Seldin's house, my temporary lodging in Sarasota, because I had to get out of Washington State, is I get up in the morning and I go down to the beach and have a little meditation. And then in the evening, when I'm all done, I go back to that beach and have a little meditation during the day. And even in the middle of the day, I try to get out maybe outside and sit under a tree for a few minutes. That's my thing. I would call that preventive medicine. Things we do every day ourselves and with the children to sort of keep ourselves healthy, which is a little different than redirecting ourselves when we're a little off. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And those techniques and practices will be different for different people. If you're an artist, it might be artistic. If you're physical, it might be running or yoga or Tai Chi. If you're a social person, it might be getting in touch with your best friend and just chit-chatting or journaling or whatever. So.
Right, there's many different ways. And John, you do a lot of helping people with that. Cindy, go ahead. You may be muted. Not hearing you yet.
Now, are you hearing me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. So, John, we must be at the beach at the same time.
I'll see you there.
And the reason why I started doing that is because I needed to tell myself that regardless of what was going on, I have to put me first. So it's the first thing that I do. I roll out of bed and I go take a walk. And I live on an island, and so it's easy to walk down to the beach. And it's the last thing I do most of the time. There are some nights that I haven't, but most of the time I don't. And I do, and I discovered that when I do, I have less running in my mind when I'm trying to go to sleep or when I'm waking up. And then I started something that I call 959, and I sent it to my family, and they posted it on their Facebook. And I set my alarm, and at 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, I do something for someone else, or I do something that is peaceful. So I may get still for just a minute. I say a prayer for just a minute, or I send a text to someone who may be shut in and possibly lonely, or I send off an email to my choir or a friend, or I say thank you to someone for something that I have overlooked, but I pause at 9 o'clock, 5 o'clock, and 9 o'clock just to make myself recognize that life is still here and there's a lot to be grateful for.
That's so beautiful, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure, you know, does anyone else have a practice that they would like to share? I think it's helpful. We all have things. If you do, just unmute.
I can share something really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest tool that we have to use when even when we just begin to feel stressed is something that we have with us all of the time, our breath. And just to check in with your shoulders. I know I'm a person that holds stress in my shoulders. And so just opening up my shoulders and then consciously taking in a deep breath. And even if you want to count and breathe in 4 counts and breathe out 4 counts and do that 3 times. And it's just 30 seconds to just put a different perspective on things.
And Kathy?
Yes.
Yeah, I think Mark Davis put an interesting thing in the chat. I do think this is a meeting about financial implications, and I don't think we want to spend an over amount of time on self-care, which is an important component, but is not the point of this meeting. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, get it. Thank you. Okay, so you will be finding out more about self-care. Anyway, Tim, yep.
Well, a couple of things. First off, I just want to reiterate something that's been mentioned, but may just need to be restated. The Montessori Foundation and the IMC are preparing 2 messages that will be going out either this evening or tomorrow, depending on bandwidth. I'm actually curating as we speak a draft of the parent email. Though they will be intended to be both a message to you and your staff and a separate one that will go out to parents, and they'll get posted in various ways, and use them if you find them helpful. But in terms of the thing that Mark Davis speaks about, just to go back to basics, I myself, I'm a school consultant of many, many years. When you're up against this and you have the same thoughts that you're having, Mark, we all know what to do, but it's sometimes very difficult to get through it. And what I'm finding incredibly useful is, first off, having this kind of refresher that isn't dry, but is very supportive, and to know that we're going to have to guide one another through the granular step-by-steps. But the big steps are just to refresh memory, because we've had so many meetings, are in terms of finances, the first thing you need to know is what's the money in the bank. Write it down. Second thing is you need to look at your projected cash flow and figure out what are your fixed expenses that will keep happening no matter what. The next thing is to figure out what things could you slow down, hold off paying for, even though you're accumulating the service, and what things could you modify. And then you start getting into the decision trees about things that you could do, and you're going to want to really think very carefully before making some of those decisions. We've already discussed, no one wants to lay off staff. There are loan programs that are beginning to pop up and give us some hope of other things. You're going to need to be thinking about raising money, either from investors or family or friends or saving. And we're going to be doing multiple group sessions like this, getting more and more granular, in addition to the small group working teams that Kathy and I traditionally call Montessori mentorship circles or Montessori leadership circles, councils, subgroups of equals who are trying to think things through and protecting each other's confidentiality. We're also having a meeting at the same time. Same time. 4 o'clock tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Or
We have a meeting tomorrow where we're going to be talking about contingency planning. And it again is going to be peeling another layer of the onion back, but it's not going to lead you to come out of the meeting with a contingency plan. We're going to talk theory. My son Mark would say, what we're doing is first passes at what you learn in MBA school, right? And what we need to do, because this is us, it's not dry theoretical case study. This is reality. Is we need to be looking at a lot of things simultaneously. It starts with keeping ourselves calm, keeping our staff calm. That self-care and care of your teachers eats up the first energy. Then keeping your parents calm and bonded to you, as we've been discussing. And then beginning to formulate your next steps, which is what this meeting is about. All the meetings up to now have been mostly town halls where people just vent and share their fears and experience. Now we're beginning to circle into the reality. And again, we know that you can go to the SBA website, you could get all kinds of information on what people do. And probably when it's really a school, you need more than just theoretical information. We need to guide each other through the process. And that's where the peer-to-peer conversation comes in. So it's just one step down that journey.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. And Mark, I think you wanted to add something?
I do. I want to just, let's just set some context here. I feel like maybe this is redundant, but I'm going to risk the idea of the chance of looking stupid by just saying something that I feel needs to be said, which is that Montessori schools are not normal businesses, and we are not normal business owners, right? I've been a normal business owner. I've worked for 2 different Fortune 500 companies, and I've been senior management at both, and I know what normal business is like. This is not normal, all right? We do what we do because we care about it, right? We are emotionally invested in a way that most business owners aren't, and that is going to make our solution a little harder to arrive at, right? Because we care. We do this, for a reason that is not a traditional business reason, right? I mean, very few people go into Montessori because they hope to get rich. And if they do, I hope they quickly were disabused of that notion. And so the result is that we are all very much, in a place where our stomachs are twisting and we're all in a knot and we're very anxious, not just because we're worried about our livelihoods, but because we care about our families, we care about our staff. And that is why I think this self-care thing that John and Tim have been bringing up are just so important. We are not normal business owners, and this is not a normal situation. I mean, if I'm a dry cleaner, I'm worried about my family, right? I might, to some extent worry about my part-time staff. This is not dry cleaning. Now the positive is that our families are not normal customers, right? They've entrusted us with the thing that they care about most in the world, right? And so they have a relationship with us. That's the only savior here, is that the bond is mutual. They care about us and we care about them. And if we've done it right, that is going to be a source of strength. Now, Mark Davis has pointed out that for him, the salary is 70% of his budget. And he's probably quite anxious. What am I going to do about that salary? And that's pretty much true across the board. I mean, the percentage is going to change a little bit from school to school, but it's still going to be very high, right? And we care about these people, and what are we going to do? I mean, we don't want to lose our teachers. We don't want them to starve. They may be friends. At the very least, they're people we care about. What I'm going to say is this, there is no magic solution. And to the extent that there will be solutions, they are going to be those things that we find in these small groups that we discuss. I know how I want to approach it with my school, but my school has different exists in a different economic environment than some other schools. So instead of saying, here's my one size fits all solution, what I am going to say is this: that self-care thing is important because it's only when we're able to relax and detach ourselves that we are able to escape paralysis. And there's basically two different terrible things we can do, right? And I've done them both, all right? I am not immune. So when my first business failed way back in 93, I think, I was paralyzed. I was just utterly, I was devastated. I could see the bills creeping up. I didn't know what to do. And I sat there, and I probably waited a month longer than I should have to take the steps I needed to take. And that was because of the emotional weight of that. And then the other thing is flailing. We don't want to flail. We will need to be calm and consistent. We need to model, that stability for our families and our staff. And so the self-care thing, I know it feels like a distraction. I understand. I'm not Mr. Self-Care either, to be honest. I'm much more analytical. I'm a numbers guy. But if we don't take a step back and look at this situation in a calm and as objective as possible way, we're not going to come to the solution. So let's not consider this a segue. Let's not consider this discussion about taking care of ourselves to be moot. I think it's fundamental to how we're going to approach these solutions. And again, I talked a lot. I apologize if it seems all obvious and a distraction, but I hope this was useful to someone.
Mark, it's really, you tied it together very, very nicely for us. And I appreciate your perspective because it's a personal story, it's a personal perspective. I think it's really important that we recognize that there's also neuroscience behind that. So it makes common sense, but let's stop and remember that we don't make the best decisions if we aren't coming from a place of calm and centeredness. And so if we have, as the children call it, the hijacked amygdala, right? I had an 8-year-old who told me he pushed his friend because I used to teach the mindfulness to the children. And he said, well, of course I had to push him. My amygdala was hijacked. So don't let your amygdala get hijacked and run your business through your fears and through that lens. And the only way to get back to the part that actually helps us with judgment and rational thinking and perspective is really our prefrontal cortex. And the only way that engages is when we're all here and we've taken that time for self-care. We as school leaders have big decisions to make. We have really big decisions to make, and we have to make them quickly. And many of you have already made many decisions all the way up to this point. In 2 weeks, have you ever made so many decisions that are really monumental decisions that affect a lot of people? You're going to have a lot more decisions to make. And sometimes, like Mark said, you might lag behind a little bit because you're sort of paralyzed or immobilized by the fear and even the fear of making the wrong decision, right? I mean, it happens to all of us. And so being able to say, how do I step back? How do I get counsel from other colleagues that can help me, guide me through this? This is an important part of what we do. Getting to making decisions quickly. We don't have a lot of time on some of these decisions. As Tim said, you analyze your expenses, your fixed costs, and you look at what can I defer, what can I cut. Some of these decisions, we don't have a month's worth of time to think about those decisions. We have to make those decisions fairly quickly. So having our minds and our bodies fully intact to make good decisions is going to be an important piece of this. Cindy, I'll go to you.
Not yet.
No,
Not
we're
yet.
not getting it yet, Cindy.
Cindy is with me. So she's on Sarah's, she's on a phone through my connection. So here she goes.
Okay.
I'm just noticing that there are some people who have some questions or concerns through the Zoom chat, and because we are limited in time, I just wondered if I could answer a couple of them.
Absolutely. Thank
Please.
you very much.
Okay. One person asked a question about staff and unemployment insurance.
Mhm.
And I just wanted to say that there are a couple of things, and be careful about your terminology. Laying someone off means that you are not guaranteeing them employment. Furloughing someone means that you are. And so to let a staff person know that you're furloughing them gives them some sense of job stability, even though they may not have it in the moment. If you're going to consider something like that, the first thing that you should do is, one, to ask if there is anyone who is able to reduce their hours or to be furloughed for a short period of time until we return again. And to let them know how that works by being able to get unemployment if hopefully you have unemployment being deducted from their check. And there is also something that the unemployment department does so that you can work some and get unemployment at the same time. And so that's also a possibility of saying, we can employ you for X number of hours. Would you be willing to do unemployment for the opposite, the remainder of those hours? And something in one of the packages that was okayed and is now about to be signed by the president, or has been by now, I'm not sure, is that unemployment, rather than just being the 60 to 70% of unemployment, and you can even go to your unemployment website, put in how much your salary is, and you can determine that it's a machine and it will tell you how much your unemployment will be, so that if a staff person needs to do that, they can have a sense of that. But the legislation that is out now is supposed to do that amount plus an additional $600 for anybody who ends up being unemployed. It's also something that, if that's going to happen, that you do it quickly. You have to assume that all of your parents are not going to pay tuition, and so to just do the ask of your staff, even if you don't feel like you're quite ready yet to lay them off, is something that is healthy for you and helpful for your staff, because they may be more stressed not being at home, just being with their families, and might actually appreciate being able to receive unemployment and be furloughed. So that is one piece. What was the other question about what other things can people do for tuitions? I asked Sarah if she could put the comments that we had from our meeting, from our Google Doc, into the chat room. Sarah, can you do that? If not,
I'm working on it right now.
Okay, because we just did creative ideas and came up with a number of various creative ideas that we decided that we were going to draw up and say to parents. Normally we would have billed on Wednesday. I asked the bookkeeper to hold off until Friday. I did a video that we sent out to parents yesterday that said, something is coming. Please be positive. Please avoid negative chit chat. Turn that into positive suggestions. If you have any, send it to me. We'll put them in the pot. And then I'm going to give them a cafeteria plan of what they can look at with variables about what they will be able to select. I have already invited staff, anybody who would like to be off, and to my surprise, there were 7 people who said, yes, actually, I think I'd like to do that. And so from the responses, and I'm going to ask every single parent to respond about what they can do with the tuition. From that, we'll be able to build our budget. But I also want to say, for anybody who doesn't want to go after a loan, our school has never had to do a loan, ever. But it's not beneath me, because I can always turn it around. But it's better planning, because we also don't know how many other people are going to be laid off between now and the next 3 or 4 weeks or so. And so it's better planning to have the money in the kitty if you need it, return it if you don't. And if you end up getting the full amount of money, you can bring back those furloughed staff and keep moving forward.
Thanks, Cindy. Really, that's exactly the kind of practical advice people are looking for. Tim, go ahead. Did you want to add something?
Well, I think Cindy, thank you. That was brilliant. And I love the document you shared. Thank you so much. That's a good example of best practice. Sitting around with the people you trust, the bigger that circle is. I mean, gathering your employees, not a bad thing. But if you need to do it in confidence, you do it in confidence. But the idea is we're a family. And that doesn't mean I'm suggesting bring the kids, bring the parents into the room with you, but there are times when I've even done that. I have stories to tell about how we've saved schools by getting everyone in the conversation. But I think you start by brainstorming, which is what Cindy was doing in that letter that Sarah shared. Brainstorming doesn't mean every one of those ideas is a good one. I wanted also to respond to something that Paula asked, which is what's best practice?
Mm-hmm.
There's no one answer. Every school, every situation is different, but I will offer a quick basic. This is not something you're going to suddenly do tomorrow. In my opinion, what you want to do is get your families re-enrolled, ideally in January, if you can. That's not going to happen this year. Normally get them early. First payment, I personally believe in offering discounts for prepayment. Not everyone can do it. You have an argument that favors those people who have the ability to downstroke the entire tuition. But ideally, since you're committing to your teachers for an entire year, ideally you want to reward parents for paying you in advance so you don't have to worry about losing money. I think we can go into much more depth on all this, but then normally it's 60% in June, balance before the new year. And then you add on a fee, a significant fee, if they want to pay monthly, and start that in June, finishing up in March. Knowing that you're going to accept some kids throughout the year, or they're going to enter later, or they're going to get behind. That happens in every school. So that's just my off-the-cuff advice of what you want to do normally.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And I think that now that, we have a good idea, people are putting some thoughts and some questions and things in the chat box. What we will do as the task force is put these together, bring together the people that you've heard from today. And if any other people want to participate, let us know. But we'll put together some very clear talking points about best practice. And although we're not going to tell you how to run your school, we are going to be able to facilitate a discussion where ideas are shared and looked at what works for individual schools, much better than we can do on a very large group. This is a pretty broad stroke right now. And people they have a lot of different ideas of how they're doing things. I just want to make sure that you recognize what the long-term impact is. There's a short-term impact, but you're making decisions that have a very long-term impact on your school. So I just appreciate everybody sharing, and I'm opening it up if you have more questions or thoughts that we can make sure that we address in the smaller group meetings. We'd like to hear from you. And I think Jonathan had something to add. Is that right?
At the moment, no.
Oh, I thought you were, okay.
No, so I'll keep my big mouth shut.
Okay. Any other specific questions? I think, Cindy, a lot of the practical information about, links and government agencies and loans and, how your school has done it, as well as I know Mary Ellen. I don't know if Mary Ellen's still on because I can't see her, can't see everybody at once, but Mary Ellen also has some real practical nuts and bolts things to share with folks. And so, I appreciate all of you reaching out and helping each other with this, but we'll still take questions and see if we can take care of a few more practical things for you before the end of today's call.
I'd like to ask my son, Mark, who's now produced 2 very nice videos in his home video setting, to think about what other granular things might be good for a short video, like how to do a cash flow budget, or how to look at variable expense, whatever else from your MBA training you think would be really helpful. Or share with people online links to existing videos. But I think, as you said, you and I know from your grandmother, running a school is an irrational act. I mean, we do this out of love and passion. This is not only Fortune 500, this is more than a local dry cleaner, although they certainly love their business and love their customers, their employees. This is really over the top. The other thing that I'd really like to do is remind you, we've got another workshop coming up tomorrow. That one is on contingency planning and basic. Now, how do you begin to wrap your head around where do we go from here? That's going to be followed up next week by a series of both these small breakout groups and other more increasingly granular or more practical focused topics on fundraising, because most of you really ought to be raising money, not necessarily publicly. I'm not doing any public thing for the foundation or the school. I'm going after my closest, most loyal past parents and friends, asking for support. And that's what I would do if I were in your shoes. You're going to be looking at your bank loans, sources of operating money, the SBA, all these different options that have been identified, Kiva and so forth. You're going to be trying to look at the HR issues. Kathy, I know you're scheduling a meeting specifically with an HR expert. It's next Monday at 1 o'clock, right?
Wednesday at 1 o'clock.
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yeah, email will come out Friday or Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll also be on the Montessori Foundation announcements page.
Yeah, you can register for those, and he'll be very helpful, I think, and there'll be a panel. I believe Martha Carver Martha's done a lot of work with HR, and I believe you're going to be on that webcast as well. Is that correct? Thank you very much, my friend. Appreciate that. So yeah, I think that Mark Davis, I'm going to go back to your question that people want to know, what do I do about April's tuition? Okay. Am I supposed to charge people April's tuition? And I come back to value what you are offering, value what you have created, and ask parents to support that and to pay you. That if you want to have different approaches and choices and all of that, but I'm just going to tell you, I think that you want to start from a place of valuing what you've already created.
That's a really good point, and I think it's worth expanding on a little bit in a little bit of time. Many of us run relatively small schools, or we're operating with children who are young. We tend to think of ourselves with a child care center mentality. But the level of training it takes and the capital investment that it takes to train a Montessori teacher, to set up a Montessori classroom, everything about it is a much more complex, multi-year process. We are schools, and we're called schools for a reason. Schools operate not on a day-by-day, hour-by-hour basis. We're not child care centers, and really child care centers are no longer that way either. You're asking people to reserve space in your school for a year. It doesn't mean that you won't have someone move out of town or lose their job and ask you for release from agreement, and that you would never, ever let them do it. But I think the general mindset has to be, you're asking people to make a serious commitment to your school and value what you're selling. It's not child care. It is school. And it's the whole value proposition of the community that you offer the parents, the children, the teachers, and the long-term relationship that you're seeking. If you ever show up in my office asking for a tour of Newgate and to enroll a child, I'm going to say, I want your grandchildren coming to this school. And I'm not kidding. And if you can't, in your heart of hearts, see that happening, I'd say go find a school where you can, because you really need to be at that kind of school. That's what makes schools great, whether it's a military school or a Montessori school. Passion.
Thank you, Tim. Martha Carver, can you speak to your comment? You put a comment in there I think deserves, I'd like to hear you say it and share with everyone.
Sure. So once we had the time to breathe, after, constantly having the floor ripped out from underneath you, my team started talking, and one of the things we came to realize in keeping up with the science of this virus is that this isn't like a tornado warning that we just have to endure for a little while and then it's going to go away. And the odds of it not coming back are high. That's not the case. There's a good chance that there is going to be the possibility of spikes in this virus. There's a good chance that it could have a new iteration in the fall. And so whatever we choose to do in our schools, we need to think carefully about, is that what we're doing sustainable? So if you're not going to give those value to those core programs, know that if you're mandated to close and continue virtual learning, which that's how you should be presenting it, is that we are promoting distance learning. We are supporting our families as best we can under the circumstances, that we need to think about what is it that we will give again and what we won't give again, and be sure that that's in policy and procedure and well understood for the new school year and or summer. And that just takes the stress off of everybody. So I don't have a magic answer to that. I'm just saying that should be the next step in our thinking if possible.
And Martha, this is this is exactly what the contingency planning discussion will be tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern time, is thinking into the future. If we're out this long, or if we come back and then we go out again, what do we do with people, program, policy? It's thinking like a chess game, which we really need to do. This is a very fluid situation, and it can not only save a lot of time and energy in schools, but it can bring the stress level down, because you're then making an intentional set of possible plans as opposed to just like dealing in the anxiety of what ifs. So thank you, Martha.
Absolutely. So I just want to thank oh, Cindy, go ahead, and then I'll close up. You have to speak through Sarah. And Sarah's muted.
There we go.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say 3 quick things. One is that one of the things that our attorney told us is that we needed to put into our admissions agreement mandated school closure or school safety closures, because it's possible that we may have to close, but it's not mandated. Also that the federal government is no longer supposed to be taking federal taxes out. And so our taxes, we had a payroll today. The employee taxes were not taken out for federal. And I know that another school had ADP as their payroll company, and their taxes were taken out. And so you should check that to make sure that your payroll company knows that that should not be happening, which is something that is helpful for your staff and helpful for you as well. And someone mentioned asking to wait on their business loan. What I did was to look at anything that we were paying, and I asked for forgiveness. So I asked for forgiveness for our rent, which was $6,700 a month. And I was granted a yes, which I really didn't anticipate, but I asked for 2 months of no payment of rent and was told yes. So I would say, look at everything you've got that you need to pay. It's worth asking the question, because it can only be yes or no. You've got a 50% chance.
Great advice. And I hope that you know that in the future meetings, we will be getting into more of the practical things that we can address more of your school's issues in smaller groups. So hold on, hang in there, everybody. Keep breathing. Slow ourselves down, and please know that you can reach out to us either individually or in the meetings that we'll continue to be offering. We really are here to help and want to try to do everything we can to get you through this and get ourselves through it as well. We really are all in this together. So thanks to the panel, the people who agreed to be here and to help share some information, and I hope you'll be hearing from us more on these small group meetings coming up next week. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Remember to save the chat. There's lots of good information in there. Get the
Stay
chat.
healthy, stay safe.
We'll leave the meeting open for a minute so you can copy the chat.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop the recording. And I thank everyone for being here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.